You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, BOOKSTORM podcast followers, we're so happy you're back again. Kristen and I feel a connection to you. We have a lot in common. We're like brothers and sisters here because we both love great fiction. We love great authors. We have one of them here with us today. You will recognize her name, Ashley Audrain. And Ashley, welcome. So excited.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
So before we get started, everyone is familiar with your very first debut novel, The Push, but I bet they don't know a little bit more about you. So I'm going to give a quick little bio to entice our listeners and readers. So you know The Push, everyone. We loved it. It was a New York Times, Sunday Times out of London, and a #1 international bestseller. It was a Good Morning America book club pick. It's sold in more than 40 territories. And now I see, Ashley, I just realized this, it's being developed as a limited television series.
Yes, hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah, in the works.
How wonderful. We're excited about that. Now, Ashley previously worked as publicity director for Penguin Books. How appropriate, in Canada. Of course, you're going to be a writer. And you also worked in public relations. But we're here to talk to her today about the second book, which Kristen and I loved, called The Whispers. And we're not the only ones who loved it. Mary Kubica, a friend of BOOKSTORM who's been on our show, says it is an addictive novel by the queen of psychological drama. We have Lisa Jewell, the famous author. She says it is spellbinding, shimmering, visceral. Ashley Audrain is in a league of her own. And then we have Nita Prose, who we adore. She calls it enticing, nuanced, and unflinching. If that doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will. And we totally agree. Can't wait to dive in.
Thank you.
Well, Ashley, we're here, of course, to talk about The Whispers. We love this beautiful cover and this fantastic book. Now, without giving away any spoilers, I give a little summary of what the book is about, and I would love it, of course, if you wanted to add anything at the end. And this one's hard to not give away any spoilers, so I'm going to be very, very careful. In your story, The Whispers, we explore the lives of women as mothers and as partners in a way that thrills, entertains, and provokes. It's set in a neighborhood that's become increasingly gentrified. There's one couple who, they're an elderly Portuguese couple. They're kind of the holdouts from the old neighborhood, the Alvaros, and they're raising their disabled son. The rest of the neighbors that we meet are upscale younger couples and families. One day, next door to the Alvaros, 10-year-old Xavier, is that how you pronounce his name? Xavier or Xavier?
Yeah, Xavier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Loverly falls from his bedroom window and he ends up in the hospital in critical condition. Now, we look at this incident through 4 different narrators, and very quickly, I want to kind of summarize them because we're going to be talking about these characters. We have Rebecca. She is the ER physician who is treating him at the hospital, and she is a neighbor. And she's kind of running interference between the police and his overwhelmed mother. The mother is Whitney. She has the seeming ability to juggle a big-time job, what looks like a picture-perfect marriage, a beautiful home. She's the envy of the neighborhood. But as she maintains a vigil by her son's bedside, there's some whispers in the neighborhood about what exactly went down in terms of this incident. We have Whitney's best friend, Blair Parks. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she suspects her husband might be straying, and she has a fixation with her best friend, Whitney. And of course, we also hear from Mara Alvaro. She is the elderly woman next door who has an eye on what's going on in the neighborhood. Now, these four women's lives intersect in, let me just say, thrilling ways, but also really diving deep into women and the issues that we think about all the time. Do you want to add anything to that summary, Ashley?
That was perfectly put. No, thank you. You really captured it. Yeah, that is sort of what we're diving into here. Yeah.
Okay, well, wonderful. Well, Chris, why don't you kick us off and we'll enter the storm?
And as Kristen described these women, I have to say, Ashley, this book is remarkably astute regarding the complex, beautiful hearts of women, as was the push. Let's talk about the role of women in your story and in today's society, because it struck me very strong as the reader, and I could relate to it. In your intro of this novel, you quoted Rachel Cusk. She said, "What I increasingly felt in marriage and in motherhood was that to live as a woman and to live as a feminist were two different and possibly irreconcilable things." Wow. I can't agree more. The long-held society expectations of a woman's net worth to be career, romantic relationship, motherhood, a deep, meaningful friendship are embedded within us, nurture-wise, and maybe also nature in some cases. And I had to ask you, as the writer of this beautiful novel, none of these avenues ever seem to be perfectly or totally satisfying in and of themselves. Does a woman and the characters in your book have to be any of these things? Can she be all of these things, or maybe none at all?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think that's what I was really trying to explore, like for myself, my own curiosity, with these characters and the situations I put them in, and what unfolds in this book. And yeah, you're absolutely right. At each character, each of these women, has a sort of foot in so many of these different roles that she is very much expected, to take on and to excel at. And I think what I wanted to write about is that idea, that there's very much these performative roles that we are expected to have as women and we're expected to take on. And each of them are held to such high standards. And it's like, if you're not doing each of them, to a 10 out of 10, you feel like a failure. Like even a 9 out of 10, feels like a failure. And so often in some of these ways that we are like meant to, project ourselves into the world. But I think it is exactly that. It's performance, in so many ways. And I think with these women in the book, we sort of see the ways in which they perform for each other. They perform for each other because they want to be perceived in a certain way, in order to kind of have value or feel like they have value in their life. And so we have Whitney, who, as you mentioned, she's very focused on career. She wants to make money. She wants to build wealth. She wants to be successful. And she has 3 kids. And, that is a decision that she made, along the way with her partner. But it doesn't feel like her, and she knows that. And she sort of, I think, come to terms with, on a certain level that she is just not that mother. We sort of hear her inner dialogue kind of ruminating on that. She knows she doesn't, quote unquote, measure up, to all the other moms at school or the moms across the street. But she's still in it. She still has to try. She still has to, go through the motions that we all do, even though she would rather stay late at work, to work on a presentation or a meeting than come home to deal with bedtime. So we see her with her best friend, Blair, who is very much this sort of, picturesque martyr mother. We see her even like wanting to spend more time with Blair in a way so that she can sort of absorb some of the maternal nature that she has. She sort of talks about how, sometimes she likes spending time with Blair because it makes her think about her kids, and she won't think about them as much if she's not with Blair, and I love that idea of like, the love and the hate. Like she feels inadequate when she's with Blair, but also Blair helps her to kind of be closer to the mother she wants to be. So they have this really kind of interesting dynamic. And then Blair is on the opposite, end of that, where she knows she thinks about being a mother too much. She knows it's, completely consumed her world, for 7 or 8 years. And now she's feeling less needed and she's feeling less valuable. And she's feeling like, okay, I'm facing this next chapter of my life. And Whitney's nailed that across the street. You know, she's got her future, she's got her career, she finds value everywhere outside of the home, you know, and Blair just can't. And so I love this interplay between the two of them, you know, of like the ways we think we're projecting ourselves, the ways other people perceive us. And I think beneath it all is envy, you know, this envy that we have about one another's lives. And it sort of feels inescapable in a way, I think, especially for women at that time in life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you did something else very special. So we are women, we are three women here. We are in relationships. We all have children. Could see a little bit of myself in every one of these women. I'm not going to lie. We go through different times during our life, you know? And so you opened closed doors. Whitney, Rebecca, and Blair dealt with their deepest longings and desires in some very different ways, from unhealthy obsession to poisonous denial. What could we learn from these three in the real world? Or what words of wisdom, as you as the author, this is going to be tricky, might say to them or to us?
Oh, good question. You know, to be honest, I don't know that I have any words of wisdom. Like, I just don't. I think that part of, you know, it's interesting. I think why I loved just being in the like muck of writing this book, like kind of being in the weeds with it, is there is so much to think about and explore, and about women's lives at this point, and about motherhood, especially. And I think the thing that will always fascinate me about it, and that continues to fascinate me about it, is that like there is no answer. There's no, you know, playbook. I think every mother would like to think that, you know, when you first decide to have children and maybe you're pregnant for the first time, or have, you know, a child for the first time, you sort of have this like sense, or for a lot of women, you have this sense that like, you're just gonna, you know, you're taking all the advice, you're collecting all the wisdom, you're, you know, like you've got people lined up to help, and you think it's going to go a certain way. And you sort of have to go into it with this optimism, because there really is no other choice, you know? But I think very quickly we all realize that like none of it feels exactly like it should at all times, you know, and there's so much room for different experience outside of this like classic traditional kind of way motherhood's supposed to be. And yet I think I'm so interested in it all because we still talk about it the same way. Like we've been talking about motherhood, you know, in the same way, I think for decades, you know, in a sense. Like it's great that, you know, we're having these conversations, and, you know, a lot of women do, but like, it's still, I always had this vision of like the baby shower, you know, and there's a sort of a scene like this in the book, but everyone imparting their wisdom and writing note cards of here's the things that you should do with the baby, and the sort of the older generation of women sort of telling the younger generation what to do. And it's like we are still in that, you know, and there's not a lot of room for, you know, for anything different. So I really don't have any wisdom of my own. I think that why I loved writing this book, because I could just explore it so much, and take these characters to some, you know, dark but real places. Yeah.
Real. That's key. Thank you for that.
Ashley, as you just stated, you know, you do explore some of those deepest and perhaps darkest thoughts that many women experience as partners, as mothers, and they may never admit some of these things out loud. But I want to talk about one of them, and that is what happens when you don't feel love towards your child, or you love them and you don't particularly like them. I was wondering, you know, when are those feelings more about the mother's brokenness?
Yeah. I think, yes, I think so often they are. And yeah, I sort of touch on that in different ways, sort of in the push and the whispers. And in the push, we have, you know, from a very early age, we have this, you know, daughter who does not feel right to the mother, you know, she doesn't feel right about her. And they really struggle to kind of find that connection or that bond. And in the whispers, you know, we have this relationship between Whitney and her son. And I really thought it was so interesting to like think of, you know, a mother, and thankfully I don't feel this way about my own son, but a mother who really feels like she almost can't be around her son because he is so triggering for her. You know, he is very triggering for her all the time. And he has this, and he sort of knows it, you know, he has this way of being able to kind of like light this match under her that just kind of sends her off. And then she's got, you know, she has twins as well who are younger, and she seems to cope a little better with the twins. But she really cannot cope, you know, with Xavier. And I found that so, like, I just wanted to dig into that. Like, what would that feel like as a mother, you know, to, like she has, as I was mentioning, like times when she doesn't want to come home from work because she knows that he's going to like light her up in this very bad way. And as we see, that relationship, has a lot of consequences. But yeah, I think when we look back, we get these glimpses, to your point about where does that really come from? Is it about the child or is it about the mother? I think with Whitney, we get these glimpses back to her past, with her mother and how that felt. And she knows that her mother had a complicated relationship with motherhood, and she has this, without giving away any spoilers, but she has this, sense that her mom was not happy and that like probably would have wanted to leave the family if she could have. And that really fuels, I think, this sort of distance with Whitney and her family, this sort of like, she puts everything she has into like her own independence, and she sees independence as being financial and career. And so that's really what she's prioritized in her life. And to me, it almost feels like, it's two things. It's like, she's almost scared to, I think, let herself like really be in this really like vulnerable, loving relationship with her son. There's sort of this distance there that she can't quite get over. And she just worries that she just doesn't have it in her. It's the thing that she envies about the woman across the street, Blair, her best friend, that she has that so naturally, Mhm.
Yeah, I kept thinking throughout your story, when is it too much where maybe you need to get some additional help or some
Mhm.
counseling or maybe a mother's group to support you? That's what kept going through my mind at certain points
Yeah.
during the story.
No, it's a great point. It's a really great point. And it's like, is Whitney the kind of woman that would do that? I don't know. Would that be admitting too much? Would there be too much shame attached to the vulnerability of like saying out loud, that you need kind of help or support with that? Yeah, it's really interesting. It's funny that you say that because with the push, I would get comments from readers that would say like, well, couldn't, Blythe just go to a therapist and wouldn't this all be better if she had psychological help? And the answer is yes, but as fiction writers, we have to, we can't give ourselves, we can't give our characters everything they need or else there would be no book.
That's so true. I hope Kristen and I, before we started, were talking about our own mothers and our grandmothers. And in that generation, it was very taboo to admit you even had a problem, and it got shuffled under the rug. And I hope that we are becoming a society that we can confide that we need help and therapy. I just hope. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I wanted to do one more thing about moms. I'm the mother of two. These women's relationships with their children or hope for their children really intrigued me. So you spelled it out a little. Rebecca longed to be a mother, but couldn't be one. Whitney was a mother of three, but did not have the gift or desire. Excuse me. Blair was the mother of one and loved mothering, but she wasn't happy. And Mara was a mother, but she had regrets. And I just thought, you know what? Motherhood is not easy. And mothers are not perfect. Somebody said to me years ago when I was a young mom and I was concerned with something, she said, if you're concerned with whether or not you're a good mom, you're already a good mom.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning, if you're worried about it, that's half the battle.
Yeah.
What is it about the women in your story and the women that we are today? Why do we beat ourselves up so? Does this have anything to do with feminism, perhaps? Like we're trying to emulate the historic role of the man or father in the family who was being the overprotector and the wise father and whatever that image used to be. Does it have anything to do with that? Because we're so hard on ourselves.
We are. Yeah. I love that advice that phrase that somebody told you, and it rings so true, right? Like there's another there's a lot of conversations around the push of like, what's a good mom, what's a bad mom, and it is a hard conversation because I don't think there is such thing as a good mom or a bad mom. I think we are all of those things every day, both of those things every day. We have moments where we are both ends, and we sort of live somewhere in between, right? In the gray space in between. And there was somebody told me, or I had heard sort of a quote too, that said like, a good person is just a person that's trying, trying to be good. Like that is what all we can hope for and all we can strive for, but yeah, I think that it's so interesting, the conversation around like feminism and, why, like the roles that we're taking on right now and kind of the generational piece of that, it's like, ultimately we're sort of, I think what makes like our generation tricky, like I recently turned 40, and obviously I'm writing about women who are, at that stage in life. And it's like, we've grown up with this message of like fierce independence, and, women can have it all. And, you should be excelling in the workplace. You should like be a match for the man at the other end of the boardroom table. There's all of this expectation. And I feel like our generation really felt that, and really wanted to embody that and felt emboldened and felt strong about that. But at the end of the day, like, we were not raised in houses like that. We did not have examples like that. And we're still like not living in a society that really is structured for that, in so many different ways. And I think that goes so far beyond like a wage gap problem. Like, yes, there's a wage gap problem, of course. But I think beyond that is just this larger societal cultural thing that has stuck with that. And it almost makes, I think, women today feel more inadequate if they don't feel like they can do it all, because we were taught we were supposed to be able to. I think about like my mom's generation, and it's like, you could kind of pick a lane and stay there, and not feel so much guilt about it. You might not have been happy with it or felt satisfied with it, but it was sort of like acceptable and expected. So I think we're just dealing with sort of a different challenge now, but I think the problem is still there, like underneath, or feeling it in a different way, but the problem's still there. So it's just, it's interesting. It's really interesting. It makes me think, like, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I think all the time about like, what will this be like for you? Like, what will motherhood feel like for her, if she chooses to do that? Or like, what will change by then? I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't want to feel pessimistic about it. I wish I felt more optimistic though about change in that way. I do. Yeah.
Well, if nothing else, your book allowed and invited each of us to consider these things that sometimes in the rush of life, we don't. We're just doing them. But to stop back and really think about them and consider our own role as it's not just motherhood, marriage too.
Yes.
friendship too. And it really made you think. Thanks for that.
Thanks. No, thank you. Thanks for saying that.
I love what you were both bringing up so many interesting points, but I was thinking we also have to think about, what is our definition of feminism? Is that I can be just like a man, or is it I can have the same opportunities as a man? Or does a man come into play at all in our definition of feminism?
Or is it choice? Like, is feminine just choice? Like, right? Just being able to make the choice. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, you're right.
There's a scene in your story where a mother is caught crying by her daughter, and she assures her daughter, everything's okay. I'm not really crying. And, that scenario may happen every so often with all of us. But if it happens all the time, doesn't it become a little dangerous? Aren't we teaching our girls to deny their intuition and deny what they're seeing? What do you think about that?
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up or picked up on that in the book, because yes, I very much wanted that moment, to happen in the book with Blair and her daughter. And Blair is the kind of character who, lives her life, just like her mother did, much to her, she wouldn't like that. She wouldn't like to think that, but it is true, lives her life saying, everything's okay, everything's fine, every issue is swept under the rug, nothing is wrong, we're not going to talk about anything bad. And if we just pretend things are fine, then maybe they will be fine, or maybe they will feel fine. Although she knows completely that is not the case, as did her mother. We see these glimpses of memory she has about, how her mother dealt with her marriage and her life at the time. And I think that moment is so familiar to so many people, having a mother or a mother figure or someone to kind of say to you, everything's fine, you're okay, and I catch myself doing it all the time with my kids, both my daughter and my son, something's wrong, something's gone wrong, they've fallen down, we pick them up and we say, you're okay, like, don't have a moment to process this, is what we are saying to them, right? Like, don't feel the feelings you're feeling, just pretend you're okay. And it's a terrible thing to do, like, we all do it, but it feels terrible to do. And I just finished like the most fascinating book. It's called On Our Best Behavior by Elise Lunin. I don't know if you've come across this. It just published last week. It's nonfiction. And it's about, she examines, it's based on an examination of the 7 deadly sins, you know, and how they have very much shaped what it means to be a woman today in terms of like the behavior that's expected of you and the emotions that you're allowed or not allowed to have and how we live our lives. And I listened to it on audio and I couldn't get enough, just kind of going through each of the sins and as she kind of relates them to her own life and to women today. And it was so relevant to this book. And there's a whole like thesis there on like the good girl, you know,
Yes.
and so many of us grew up like that, and we're still raising kids like that, where the message is be a good girl, like no matter what that means. And we even kind of like, again, I catch myself sort of saying to my daughter, you know, when she does something, oh, you're such a good girl. And it's like, do we want to be saying that to our kids? Like, what does that do to a woman, you know, or later in life? Like what that message, you know, millions of times over in your life from people who are guiding you and educating you and all of that is really affecting. And it doesn't leave room for anything but later in life without a lot of shame, you know. I think that's so interesting, and that is exactly what you're saying. That's exactly the heart of that scene there. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, and I love what you say, because you alluded to this with the whole good woman, where a husband is mistreating a wife. And again, I'm not going to go into any details. And the more she puts up with it, the more he says she's a good woman to put up with me all
Exactly.
these years. And
Exactly
so
that.
it's so good when you brought that up, because I was like,
Thanks.
oh, you put
Yeah.
words to something that many of us have
Ugh, we've
felt
all
or
felt
observed.
it, and we carry that. We see how that carried through the generations, you know, and
Yep.
that's the
Yep.
scary part. That's the scary part that we want to stop ourselves from doing now. But yeah.
Excellent.
I had written down one quote that Blair thought to herself. She said, I always put my family before me. I always put their happiness before my own. I have never been selfish or reckless or cruel. I am a good mother. I am a good person. Same as what you're saying. And a little bit that hit me, like maybe to be a better wife, partner, friend, mother, we do have to take care of our own needs and fulfill our own passions and desires and talents. Maybe that's the key to this.
Yes, yes. And I think it's so interesting you say that, because that is, ironically, that is what Whitney's doing, right? Whitney is this woman who everyone is, you know, shaming and judging, and she's thought to be, you know, bad, quote unquote. But really, when you look at what she's doing in her life, like she's making choices for herself and she's making decisions that feel good to her, even though she knows they're not acceptable. And yes, she goes to some dark, bad places, you know, but that's at the essence of her, right? Is like putting herself first. And so that is the difference between those two women. And yeah, one of them is vilified and one of them is, you know, celebrated. So yeah, it's definitely a tough dynamic. Yeah. And to your point about, can a woman win? Like, I don't know, like, but you know, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Yeah.
So much to think about in this wonderful book, The Whispers by Ashley Audrain. Listeners, you've got to pick this up. Not just women, men. You're going to learn something of yourself in this too. This is for everybody, this book. Relationships, amped up, deep thinking book. Just loved it. And before we let you go, can you give us a clue what you might be working on next?
Ooh, yeah. So I am working on something next. I'm going to give you the annoying author answer and say I can't talk about it yet because it's too early. But it's you know, I think the themes that I've always been obsessed with are continue. So we shall see. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And you're right. Many people do say that because they feel like it's jinxing them for some reason if they want it.
Exactly.
They're working on it. We get it. Right, Kristen? We're on it. It's okay. We're just happy you're here. And hopefully we'll see you back again. But in the meantime, I want to say to our listeners, you want to connect with Ashley Audrain. You can find her on her website, ashleyaudrain.com. You can find her on Instagram and Twitter.
Right. Well,
It's been
thank
a
you.
lot of fun.
It's been such a joy to join you guys. Thanks for the great questions and the great conversation. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
We loved having you.
Bye.
Well, could we have another 5 hours? Because there's so much to talk about. It's just a wealth of thoughtful ideas, relationships, possibilities, all kinds of things. Anything that struck you strongest in there?
Yeah, first of all, at the end, I love that discussion we're having about the good woman or the good girl, because I've heard, you know, certain people in my family say, "Oh, your aunt so and so has put up with me all these years. She's a saint. She's a good woman." Meanwhile, today we wouldn't be putting up with that crap because it was a bunch of BS. And her putting up with that was not what made her a good woman.
Mhm.
And so I love that she put a name to that phenomenon
Mhm.
because it was so deadly accurate. What do you think about that one?
I agree. And in your last question, where the mother is crying and the daughter says, "What's wrong?" Well, maybe the change comes from us teaching this younger generation and our grandkids. And then our daughters grow a little stronger and they teach their daughters. So maybe the answer isn't saying, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine." Maybe the answer is saying, "Mom's going through a lot of things with this or this, but here's how I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to, talk to my friend. I'm going to talk to the individual I'm having trouble with. I'm going to see a therapist. I'm going to get a new job. I'm going to get out of this relationship, whatever it may be."
I
Maybe
love
that's a
that.
better answer.
And I love that because I think our kids should see us struggling through things because there is another side. You do get through it. And they need to see examples of people surviving things like a relationship bump in the road or a divorce or financial difficulties. And obviously, we don't want to put those things on our family to make them worry. But I think being honest and transparent is very instructive for them because it gives them hope that they too can push through these things. Otherwise, I don't think we're doing them any favors when we, like you talked about, brushing it under the rug and pretending that everything is okay.
Mhm. I like that. And also that they see us um, in all of these different roles through life, having friendships, in a romantic relationship, having a business or working career. And maybe we are honest with them that certain, giving examples of hurdles that we've overcome and showing our daughters and sons, yes, life isn't perfect. Life is hard. No matter what you do, no matter who you're in a relationship, no matter how perfect your child seems to be on the outside, you're going to go through hurdles and struggles and mountains. And at the other side, here's how we overcame. Here's how we had victory. Here's how we are making it work. That's a good lesson for all of us.
Yeah. No, absolutely. What did you think? You and I were talking about this beforehand about the idea of the whispers, and we looked at that from several different angles, which I thought was really cool. And after our discussion, what do you think about the whispers? Is that our intuition? What do you think?
Yeah, I know. We should have asked Ashley because, I want to know, did she title the book and then write it, or did she write it and then title it?
Yeah.
So we came at it through two different things. And I thought, I was thinking more negative. I thought more the whispers in our minds throughout life. You could picture these two little beings on your shoulder. Did you ever see that in the cartoons from yesteryear? The little devil and the little angel. And the devil, I'm thinking, is saying, "You're not good enough. You're never going to succeed. Their relationships are better than yours. You're never going to be." And I think those whispers are the kind that we need to silence and say, "No, you know what? I'm not going to listen to that." And maybe even verbally, if not mentally, denounce it and speak positive words into our life. Like some people say, they get up and they say, "You know what? Today is going to be a great day. And I'm going to do something amazing at work. And I'm going to have a wonderful dinner with my friend," and whatever it may be. But I do think sometimes this feeding of negative thoughts is a seed that grows a lot of trouble.
Yeah. I think that's really, really a good observation. And I would like to have asked Ashley this as well because she's very clever, because she also brought up the whispers that we shouldn't silence. And those are the ones relating to intuition, that our gut, something's not right, that we
Mhm,
need to investigate. Maybe we do suspect our husband's having an affair or there's something else going on.
mhm,
So it's like two sides of the whispers, like the devil and the angel that
mhm,
you were talking about.
mhm,
What are the ones we silence and what are the ones that we give voice to?
mhm.
And I love that you and I looked at that from two different angles. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I like what you said because we do, as people, all people and women, you could call it sixth sense. You may call it women's intuition. The people call it all sorts of different things. And there's a lot of times in life where you do need to listen to that. And you cannot listen to the negative voices, even real voices who say it's all your imagination. This is not happening. That's actually called gaslighting. It's a
Yes.
psychological term that's very serious. this brought up one quote that Blair said. Blair thought about her husband. Blair understood in that moment something about her husband that she had not wanted to be true. But there are risks people take when they want something badly enough, in this case, a good marriage. There are things they learn to ignore. That spoke strongly in every field of life. As women, know when to, yes, pay attention to that intuition, sixth sense, listen to it, explore it.
Yeah. And I love what you said, because Blair did give voice to it, considered it, and went on with her decision. But she listened to the whisper and then decided on her path forward. And I think that's important. That's really a good observation.
Yeah, because Kristen, we were saying this before, you and I, there are a lot of people in this world who live in misery because they're afraid to confront truth, or they're terrified of change.
Yeah.
And, as I'm getting older, I just think to myself, and I tell my nieces and nephews, life is too short. It's too short. You don't like your job, go get another one, because before you know it, your chances are gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but
I like
so
that.
much to think about, Just loved it so much. And thanks for joining us today, everybody. We loved having you. We're going to leave you with a few storm predictions to pique your interest, or if you want to read ahead, we've got Madeline Martin, Keeper of Hidden Books, Katie Quinn and Janie Chang, Phoenix Crown, Matthew Quirk, Inside Threat, Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray, The First Ladies, Viola Shipman, Famous in a Small Town, Fiona Davis, Spectacular, Sandra Brown, Out of Nowhere, and Tiffany Hammond, A Day Without Words.
And listeners, thank you so much. And again, we are so appreciative of you sharing our links, our socials. We are growing every single week, but it's because we think we love having these deep discussions with these authors about these underlying themes in their novels. I think we're doing something unique. We love it, but we also love your input and your feedback, and we just are grateful. We, of course, are excited. We want you to stay on the radar with us. You can visit us at bookstormpodcast.com, at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on TikTok. You can find us on YouTube, search for Bookstorm and Podcast, and you can see all of our wonderful author interviews. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.